Hello everybody, I'm Richard Michael Owen here at Owen Automotive and we're back on the XK150. Welcome to episode 8, let's get into it. Okay, time to get started on the Jaguar XK150. And with a bare shell like this, one of the things I like to put in right away is the wiring harness, the electrical system and all the components, which reminds me I gotta get the brake lines and the fuel lines in as well. So on the bench here, you can see the game plan. The most important one is getting the wiring harness in. Now this wiring harness comes to us from a company called AutoSparks, an amazing company that does this beautiful braided wire on their looms, and I've never had an issue with them. One thing I like with AutoSparks is you can custom order any harness for alternator conversion, for fog lights, and also for an electric cooling fan. So we have two of those options here with this harness. Got the grommet kit from them as well. I ordered some headlight pigtails. That usually doesn't come with the kit. These came from AH Spares. You can see the number there. Little trick for you guys. Got a lot of 5-way connector pieces. Now here's the dashboard brackets. I can't wait to do the dashboard. Hopefully we'll get it in by the end of this episode. Then we have some of the main components here in the fuse blocks. I found that this fuse block had cadmium finish, so I refinished that in cadmium. Now these old ones, these old brass ones, I learned a trick from a guy that used to do big rigs, and that's just sandblast them. So these have been sandblasted, and I put some corrosion protection on them. Here's what these fuse blocks sit on, and I noticed there were 2 rubber grommets I saved in there, kind of a safety thing. I got some components here still to clean up. This is the overdrive relay, I believe. You can see where all the wires go on that. Got the starter solenoid. It's probably the original one. Do we see a date here? There it is, 6th month of 57. So it's the original starter solenoid. Whoever gives Lucas a bad name, look at that. The original starter solenoid's going back on this car. Okay, without further ado, I want to get this harness on the car. There's a real tight spot on the firewall cross member it has to tuck into, so I'll probably start around there. And I know Dave at the Classic Car Cave will be real happy to see the original wiring routing of all this harness. So let's get it on the car. So I think I got to spend a minute and talk about wiring diagrams. I have 2 options here. One is from XK150 Explored. It has these beautiful colored diagrams that illustrate all the separate electrical functions of the cars. The same thing's mimicked in the Coventry Auto Components book. You can see the cover here, Jaguar XK150. He has early and late Stewart at Coventry Auto Components there. So this is the cheaper alternative. If you have the Bible XK150 Explored, you'll get the same information. Now, I want to talk about the practical application of this. So if we look, we have the fuel tank sender, and we have some 2 green wires that basically have a connection and go to the gauge. You can see the same with Stewart's here. Here it is, and it goes to the gauge. So this part of the wiring harness I actually installed in a previous episode when the chassis was just sitting on the ground. And that's because this wire runs through the chassis itself. So the wires start where the fuel tank sender would be. I'll show you where that is. And they run over to the other side of the chassis, actually attached with 2 Audi clips. They go into the chassis right near the rear leg there. They go through the chassis. They collect the fuel pump wire right near the fuel pump, the white fuel pump wire. Then they come out near one of the supports for the body. Yeah, there's some grommets in there. Then from there, it runs up the engine bay firewall to the fuse box area. And for whatever reason, the sender wires turn to a PVC wire. So it's time to put the main harness in the XK150. Most of it lives in that cross member, the firewall cross member, so it's all inside and hidden. It's kind of hard to cram it all in there. And at the end here, we can see the area here that goes through the firewall about right here, and then this is all the fuse block area. And there's a pigtail which keeps going to the carbs for the overdrive switch on the carbs. Now this kind of T-section here, this comes out for all the dashboard functions. The signal switch is over here. And to the right, we have the overdrive switch and the dip switch for the headlights. And there's one more pigtail down and around that goes to the engine bay for the overdrive relay and the flasher unit. So yeah, let's start putting this in. I think I'm gonna put this in near the firewall first and try to feed this all through. Let's see how this goes. Okay, this was a lot bigger job than I anticipated, pulling the wiring harness through the cavity into the firewall. I'll show you the process. The firewall hole, I think, is a little undersized for this wiring loom. I think if I was to do it again, I would definitely punch out that hole in the firewall to 1.5 inches. And that would make it a lot easier for this wiring to come through. I'll show you. It was really tough to come through, and it slightly damaged the sheathing, which is annoying. Yeah, so definitely that hole I think is a little undersized for this job, and it's something that I wasn't anticipating. I haven't had to cram such a large amount of wiring through such a small hole. But I got it through, and yeah, let's move on. Okay, so I got the main harness in. Next I want to get the engine and the front light harness also installed. It'll be a lot easier. It doesn't have to cram through any small holes. So the main part here connects to that fuse block area. Then it runs around the engine bay, and then we have the starting carburetor, the distributor, and auto switch. Then it keeps going forward. It does the right-hand lights. The horns are down here, green and black. Then I'll run across to the other side to do the lights and finish up around the generator. So yeah, let's put this on the car. So here it is installed. We can see that the front body harness starts at the fuse block area and runs down the right-hand side of the engine bay here. Then it tucks into the inner fender area, and I spent a lot of time covering the wiring harness here. I want it protected from road debris. It's right near the wheel right here, so I thought that was an important step. Now from the inner fender, we have 2 spots where the wiring pokes out here into the engine bay, and that's for all the connections. The connections are protected, and there's a bit of a service area here, which is quite nice. The rest of the harness runs underneath the front apron, the front valance area there, and I put some small perforations just in case moisture gets into the sheathing. Now, the left-hand side is very similar to the right-hand side, but the alternator and generator wires poke out on the left-hand side of the engine bay here. Here's the last major piece of the puzzle. It's the rear light body harness. I think the bullets go towards the rear of the car, and it'll come forward to that fuse box area. Let's see the routing of this one. So the rear body harness, it starts here at the fuse block area. Yeah, there's a lot of wires here. Then it goes down the firewall underneath the car, and it actually goes back inside the car around the shut panel, kicks over the rear fender, the inner fender inside the car to a service area that's reachable from the trunk there. And that really connects it to all the 3 other pigtails, the pigtail for the trunk and the lights on either side. Okay, look at that. All these wiring harnesses are now in the car, and it all really comes together at this control box here. We've got some fuses. We have 6 fuses, and I wired them according to the label on the lid. I'll show you what that looks like. And up at the top here is a junction box. This just connects some of the harnesses together. Now, this was a bit of a job to get all the lengths correct. I'll show you how much wire hides underneath this bracket, and it's a lot of wire, and it's some thick harnesses. And to land it so we don't crush any wires was a bit of a task. But doesn't it look lovely here now, all finished up? To give you an idea of what this looked like, I'll show you some pictures from 8 months ago when this came out of the car. And you couldn't discern one wire from the next. They were all just brown. So that's why I really like to put a new wiring harness in these restorations. It makes the car so much more serviceable. So yeah, I have some more components to put in here. I know I'm not going to put them in right away because we have a lot of modifications to make to this car. There's an alternator going in, there's air conditioning and power steering, and I want to respect those systems. So we're going to modify what you see here as those systems go in. Likely I'll need to draw some power off this fused ignition. Yeah, so that's it for this area for now. I'm going to turn my attention now to that dashboard. Let's get into it. All right, next up I want to put in the dash and the instruments. But I want to respect what happens above and in the cowl area here. And the first thing I noticed is that this cowl has a lot of resonance to it. Has that drumming effect. That means that this is a panel that needs sound deadening material. Not so much on the cross member. It doesn't resonate, but the cowl does. So I'm going to put some of that sound deadening pad we saw in the last episode in there, and then start assembling everything in here. Time to take a break from wiring. We can check out what just rolled into the shop back here. So coming into view is a 1948 Jaguar Mark IV. We don't see a lot of these around here. I don't know how many survive. Probably just a handful in Canada. These cars are pretty unique. They started construction in the pre-war era, 1935, and they continued production after the war. So that's why this car looks kind of like that Bentley sports saloon pre-war kind of looks, but it actually was produced in 1948. The MGT series kind of went through that metamorphosis as well. I'll just show you some footage of my dad driving into the shop here. It really has that nice sleek profile. In profile, I think this car is really, really elegant. One interesting fact about this car is it's a completely all steel construction. And that's kind of unique because cars usually that have this shape are ash framed with metal wrapped around it. And the all steel construction, I think, is a way to go because it really maintains the doors. They don't sag and the gap's a lot better. I think Bentley had a similar construction method with their Mark VI R-Type. So this thing's powered by a little 4-cylinder Triumph engine. Some people say it's underpowered. They made like a 6-cylinder version called the 2.5 liter, which had, I guess, a bit more torque and a bit more weight as well. And I think they both used a Triumph gearbox. Inside, it's all wood as you expect from Jaguar, and you can really see the XK120 dashboard layout in this little Mark IV. It's a great car. I really like it. It's neat to see a survivor like this. So what do you guys think? Would you put that little 1.5 liter in your garage? Is it too antiquated, or is it a 1940s mobster kind of car? Let me know in the comments below. So in the meanwhile, I've been spending a long time getting everything ready for the dashboard fascia here. A lot of the knobs and gauges here were a lot of work. I'll show you what it looked like coming out of the car. The previous restore had the windshield out and they painted all over this. So I had to clean all this white paint off the back of the gauges. It took a lot of time to get these all cleaned up. But now they're looking lovely. The faces on the gauges are nice and clean. All this Bakelite switch gear was a bit of work to get cleaned. You can see these Bakelite switches have kind of a rotating contact on there. And to clean these up, I walnut blasted them. I just love walnut blasting. No grit, cleans all the nooks and crannies out real nice. Then I washed them and put this oxidization protection from Worth on it. Sorry, the label's kind of saturated. This oxidization protection is good. It stops the corrosion, and it also kind of puts oil into the Bakelite and makes it look new again, not like a 70-year-old switch. So what else we got going on here? We got these LED lights. I love to fit these LED lights. You can see there's the incandescent companion. These are so much brighter, no heat, no draw of energy basically. Love those things. Did the cleaning treatment to the wiper switch and the light switch. Looking all lovely. I still have the old wires attached to kind of help me out and figure out what goes where. Here's the dashboard fascia, replated in cadmium. Some of this hardware and some of these lights rely on this plate for a ground, so I can't just go and paint that silver. It has to be plated. And what do we have here? We have an old, I think it's a Jaguar Mark VII dashboard, very similar to the XK150. I love having stuff like this around because if I need one little specific screw or piece of hardware or even a switch, I can just rob it off of this old saloon dashboard and be on my way, rather than trying to hunt around for rare BA hardware and whatnot. I'll show you what that looks like on the back. There's a lot more to these old dashboards than you think, and there's a lot more useful stuff that goes across the whole Jaguar range. So I'm going to assemble this together, and then we'll attach it to the car. Yeah, I'm a real geek. I got the right tool to put this locking sleeve in place here. Look at that. Okay, got that dashboard almost fully assembled here on the bench. And I have to say, having this spare saloon dashboard as a reference made the job so much easier and faster. I just pilfered a little bit of hardware and actually took the switch here, the light switch out, because it was a little better on that dashboard. So yeah, if you guys have any old dashboards laying around, let me know. That one came from Brad at vintagejagparts.com, and stuff like this is kind of a secret weapon, a little trick to when you're doing these restorations, is to have those kind of spare parts around. Let's turn this thing over and see how these LEDs look. Okay, I just wired up the LED lights with the test leads. Let's see how this goes. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Wow, those are bright. That'll look awesome. One thing to note is that with these LEDs is they have to be positive or negative ground. They're not interchangeable. Okay, let's test the light in the fuel gauge here. Has kind of a funny arrangement. I'll show you it on the back. The bulb's actually poking through. There we go, it works. Sweet. Time to put the dashboard in the car. Just have it sitting here at a nice high point, and I have to wire it in situ here, right near the firewall. Now in preparation, I got the brackets on. For whatever reason, the L brackets there, they were just left in red oxide, so I mimicked the factory. Got the wiper transmission in there, and I put some sound deadening pads up where it was resonating pretty loudly. I also got the washer jets in there. Now that's gonna all have to be plumbed in at the same time here to the dashboard, the vacuum system. So lots to hook up. Gonna spend a few hours making sure I get all these connections right, and we'll see what it looks like finally installed. Look at that, I got all the wiring done behind the dashboard here. And I spent considerable time to make this a real model example of what an early XK150 should look like. And one thing I should say is that the switches from Lucas changed from year to year. The specification from Jaguar also changed. So there's a lot of different variants to the wiring that you see here. Here's the wiper switch. Now I bench tested this, I think in episode 3, and verified the wiring. Don't know if you can see the way it's laid out here, but that's what I figured worked best. So what's going on here? We got this big brown wire, unfused battery power going to the amp gauge. From the amp gauge, it goes to the headlight switch. From the headlight switch, it goes through this pigtail here over to the ignition switch. So sometimes if the ignition switch isn't working, it actually can be the headlight switch, kind of a Jaguar peculiarity. Up here we can see the green wires. This is fused ignition power. And there's kind of a stud block here on the fuel gauge that sends power to a lot of the various gauges and switches. And lastly, there's a stud block here. This gives a good ground to the base plate itself and to the lights and the gauges. One last thing I want to mention is this headlight switch. I swapped it out from the one on the Mark 7, and that's because it's a 4-position switch. It has provision for the fog lights. These early XK150s didn't have fog lights, so this is a little bit of an upgrade for the owner, and it's nice to have an old original switch in there. So our upholsterer Geoff Chrysler is coming, so I got to get this dashboard out of the way. We're going to be working on the headliner. I just want to temporarily mount this dashboard. I'll note that it's nice that there's all this extra length that lets the dashboard come down like this. When I first took the car apart, we didn't really have that liberty. Okay, everybody, this is Geoff Chrysler of Rightway Heritage Trimming. We're going to be working on the headliner today, and we got this huge piece of jute going up into the roof area of the XK150 here. It's going to have to be glued in. When we first took this car apart, there was a big piece of jute in there. And this will be a really cool process to do. I don't know anything about putting headliners in, and Geoff is an absolute specialist. He's done all the great work for us with Healey's and Jaguar E-types. So I'm really looking forward to this process. It's gonna be pretty stinky, eh, getting all that glue on there.
It will be, that's a lot of glue.
You see Geoff's made some jute pieces here that's really gonna quieten down the cabin. That's what the owner wanted. So he's custom made all these pieces. We're going 3/4 inch. Gonna make the interior very quiet. And what else can we say? Here's the headliner itself. It's kind of a felt material?
It's wool cloth, they call it.
Wool cloth. This has come from England. And we got the bows here for the headliner. And red oxide like a lot of the interior pieces. And Geoff, when we took apart this car, 8 months ago, he numbered them because they're different. They have to go back in the same spot. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. I couldn't really film this huge piece of jute going up into the roof. I had to help Geoff. It really helped having it was really a two-person job. And so, yeah, you can see the jute up in there. And I should mention that when this car first came apart and we took the headliner out, there was heavy jute up in the roof. And Geoff advised me not to put sound deadening material up in there. He didn't want it falling down and causing you trouble later, because the headliner, it coalesces with the front and rear window, and it's really not an easy thing to replace.
Headliner bows.
Yeah, so Geoff's here is putting the headliner bows into the material here. That's nice, it's all been sewn to accept those already.
Yeah.
Makes life simple. So again, Geoff numbered them, so he's putting them back in order. That's really important. So just getting that headliner in place there. You can see the technique. Geoff's really wearing it here. I'm gonna put the first screw in the bow. This is how it's done, folks. Getting all the tricks and tips here. Okay, the headliner bows are in, and Geoff's applying some glue to the front leading edge that the headliner is going to wrap around. You can see why this job needs to go in before the windshield. It's nestled right in there. Okay, Geoff's moved on to the C-pillar and all the way around the door aperture here. Just gluing the headliner around that flange. And yeah, it's coming together. Let's have a sneak peek here. Look at that in there. Awesome. Okay, Geoff's been hard at work. Headliner's kind of wrapped around the rear flange here. You can see how he had to stretch it and make it look nice all the way around. And that's a real specialist trade and work. And we'll pop in here and have a look at the headliner here for the first time. Wow, look at that, guys. Looking good, Geoff. I love it. Thanks for coming in. Something that definitely I don't want to do myself. Holy. So do you have any tips or tricks for somebody trying to do this on their own, or should they just hire you?
Just leave it to a professional.
Okay, there we go. Let's leave it at that. Right on. Now, if people want to keep up with your great work, I know you're a big enthusiast of British cars. They can go to your website, right? Rightway Heritage Trimming.
That's correct.
And you also have a YouTube coming along.
I do, yep. Yep, Geoff Chrysler.
Oh, it's Geoff Chrysler?
Yep.
And we're going to see a lot of Austin Healey stuff on there because you're working on a BN1, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Early Healey, yeah. So guys, if you're interested in Healeys, go check out Geoff Chrysler on YouTube. All right, well, this is a job well done. Thanks so much for coming in, man.
Anytime.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
So while Geoff Chrysler was busy doing the headliner, I wanted to get the rear tail lights sorted, and it was a bit of a task. The seal here that separates the chrome from the body was not the right shape. It was too wide at the bottom, it was too narrow in the middle, and it only kind of fit at the top here. So to show you what I had to do, I really had to butcher the seal, glue it on there, force it down onto the body, then adjust as I needed. And that was the only way I could get it to sit properly. But they're looking really nice now. That chrome is just perfect. The rubber's sitting nice, so I'm super happy about that. Now also, I changed the trunk seal. Yes, that was part of the last episode there. I actually moved the trunk seal back where it belongs. One of the viewers commented, Steve Freeman, thank you so much. He said, persevere with the original seal. So I put the original seal back on the trunk, and then I put the other piece down here at the bottom. And his tip here was to cut actually a little space here so that any moisture that comes has an area to leave. It won't build up on the rubber. Well, that does it for this episode. Really happy with the progress of the electrical system and the wiring harness. Just have to put a few more things in place, like the battery and the starter solenoid, and we can begin to test the electrical system. Really love this dashboard. I love the cadmium finishes. I love the original switches. I love the original gauges, the original hardware, the original brackets. It just looks superb. It's my kind of way to do these restorations. And Geoff's work here making the headliner look so great. One thing that's neat is this double flange here, one for the headliner and one for the windshield that'll go on later after the full dashboard's in. And yeah, we're making progress, but we're gonna have to save the rest for the next episode. As always, everybody, thanks for watching. If you have any tips, tricks, comments, or trade secrets, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. Okay, well, that's it. See you later. Bye-bye.